class, as we start this final week of our chapter assignments and our lab assignments, I will go through our last lecture to help you all get started on Lab 8.2. For this chapter, we're using a different data set than what we've used in previous weeks. We are using the HIP data. Our DRG codes, I think, for this data set are 469 and 470. If you'll notice, our data set is quite a bit smaller. The number of items or variables in our data set is quite a bit less than what we've seen in the past. And let's see, it looks like our total number of patients in the data set is quite a bit less as well. So what we're going to start off here by doing is doing a little bit of a calculation. Your instructions say to calculate the percentage of ancillary charges, and your instruction sheet gives you the instructions on how to create that formula. So I'm going to go through that with you real quick, and we are going to label our variable percentage ancillary. Okay, so in order to do that, we are starting out with the equal sign, and we are dividing our department charge, which is our ancillary charges, divided by our total charges. So our total department charge divided by our total charge. So this gives us a percentage of what that is. So we know that, say, for patient number 1, 80, it looks like almost 87% of our total charges comes from that ancillary department. So we're going to copy this formula all the way down. And so we want it to represent an actual percentage. So we're going to do a little adjustment to our column, and we're going to change it to percentages. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to compare the two DRGs and find out if one percentage, if the range of the percentage is larger for one DRG compared to the other. So the first thing we want to do is we want to sort our data by DRG and sort A to Z. So that's going to bring all of our 469s on top, and then our 470 patient start on the bottom. So what we're going to do now here is see if we can copy and paste this to the next. So there's actually side by side. We want to make sure we're copying it with the formula. So make sure when you're doing your copy and paste option, you're choosing the values. And again, it automatically keeps it as a decimal point, but we can change that pretty easily. And now we're going to start with our 470 DRGs. And that's going to start on line, it looks like for me, line 27. And we're going to scroll down. And we're going to right click and we're going to copy it. And we're going to go up here next to it. And remember, we need to do it as variables. Oh, wait, that's not right. We're going to paste it, and once again, we're going to update those percentages, and we're just going to verify that that transferred that information over. Should be 87%, and that's 87%. So our first column should be DRG 9%, and our second column should be DRG 470 percent ancillary. Oh, let's wrap that. And we need to wrap that as well. Okay. So what we have here is our percentage of ancillary charges for each DRG set separated out. So the next thing it wants us to do is calculate a 95% confidence interval for the percentage of ancillary charges. And in order to do that, we are going to use our data analysis tool pack. And we are going to do the descriptive statistics. And our input range, we are doing just our first DRG. And our label is in our first row. And remember, we're looking for the confidence level, right? That's what we want right there. We're going to click through all these here at the bottom. And it's going to ask us where our output range is. And we are going to choose to output it right here in the same folder, in the same sheet, I'm sorry. Okay, and we'll open this up a little bit. And now we're going to do the same thing for our DRG 470. Descriptive statistics, we want a different range. And we're going to open that back up. Our labels are in the first row. We want to update where it's going to output. So we want it to output right here beside 95% confidence level. And we're going to click OK. So again, we have DRG 470 and we have DRG 469. So down here at the bottom, this very bottom, is where our confidence level comes in. And we kind of want to change this to where we're not looking at so much information. Let's go 3 decimal places. And we're going to do the same thing here. Okay. So now what we do is remember we're looking at the mean for each, the average. So we want to take the average and our average for our DRG for our DRG 469. So we're going to do an equal sign, and our upper confidence level is going to be the 0.805 plus. So actually we can do it in, so equal sign, our mean plus our confidence level equals. And now we want to do our lower confidence level. equal sign our mean minus our confidence level. And so our range is 0.773 to 0.836. This is our range. And we can change those numbers into percentages. Remember, that's what we were using before. And then if we do the same thing, we have equal sign our mean plus our confidence level. And then we're doing it again for our lower confidence level, our mean minus our confidence level. And percentage, and we're going to go out of. Okay, so for our 469 DRG, our confidence intervals are 77.3 to 83.6. For our 470 DRG, our confidence intervals are 88.2 to 89.2. So the question asks you which confidence interval is wider, which has a larger span, and then it asks you why. Why might that have, why might one have a larger span than the other? It asks you statistically and practically. Some of the things you might consider are your sample size, standard deviation, and just the spread of patients. So that's going to kind of help you answer that question B. Okay, so what I'm going to do for number 4 on your assignment is I am going to set everything up for you, and then you're going to be responsible for telling me what the null and alternative hypothesis is for 4, 5, 6, and doing those calculations, comparing them to the critical value, and telling me, answering that question. So at this point, we're kind of wrapping everything together. This is our last lab assignment. These are some of the same things you're going to be doing for your final project. So I want you to have a good idea of how the process works. What I am going to tell you is I'm available today and tomorrow. I won't be available Wednesday through the weekend. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend the due date on the lab assignment until like Tuesday of the following week. That way you all have time to verify that your calculations are correct with me, and then I have time to give you some feedback and help you if you're struggling with those calculations a little bit. Again, this is a good wrap-up assignment to kind of catapult you into the final project. So that's why I'm kind of really wanting you guys to work through this whole process together, especially questions 4, 5, and 6. One of the things you'll notice in your lab assignment is it's not asking you to look any information up from the HCUP website. It's giving you the data to make the comparisons to. So that makes that step a little easier for you, but you still need to state your null and alternative hypothesis for each one and do your calculations. So we are going to start off with number 4. Oh, well, first we need to kind of do something. Oh, no, I'm sorry. First we're going to start off with number 4, the U.S. average for percentage of charges coming from the ancillary department, which is what we just calculated. For MS-DRG 470, remember we're just looking at DRG 470, is 86.9%. Formulate your null and alternative hypothesis to see if our hospital is statistically different from the U.S. So we're seeing if they're different or not. So our null hypothesis is that our mean for ancillary charges for DRG 470 is equal to that of 86.9%. Alternative would be that they're not equal. You need to state that out in your assignment sheet. And you need to calculate a one sample t-test for the population mean. So in your textbook, you are using the formula on page, let's see if I can find it real quick. So it looks like it should be 91 to 94. Let's take a look. Yep, we are doing a two-sided hypothesis test. So your null and alternative hypothesis are shown there on page 91. And the formula that you're using for your one sample t-test is as follows. So you're comparing your mean, your average, to that of the national, that U.S. average that is given to you in your instruction sheet. Divide by the standard deviation divided by the square root of your sample size. So if you'll notice, we already have all the information we need to plug into our formula. We have our mean, we have our standard deviation, and we have our number of patients, our sample size. And the only other number we need to plug into our formula is what that average is. And we know that the U.S. average is, remember, in our instructions, it's given it to us in a percent, but for our formula, we need it in the in a percentage. So this is the information we need to plug into our formula. Again, formula is on page 91 in our textbook. And the next thing we need to do is, once we do our calculations, we need to locate our critical value. So that's going to be on table 5.1. And remember, only the degrees of freedom are in our sample size minus 1. So if we have 151 patients in our data set, our sample size is 153. Minus 1 would be 152. And in our table on page 93 in our textbook, we know that our table goes from 100 and then it jumps clear up to 1,000. So we're going to stick with the degrees of freedom of 100. So our range is going to be, our critical value range is going to be 1.984 to a negative 1.984. So once we calculate our t-statistic, plugging in the highlighted information into our formula, we're going to compare that to our critical value range, this range. Once we do that, we are able to make a decision of whether we would reject our null hypothesis and conclude that our mean is different than the national statistic, or we would not reject the null hypothesis and state that there's no difference between the percentage of ancillary charges for us and that U.S. rate. You're going to tell me what that conclusion is. Okay, and again, what I strongly suggest is working through this lab, getting your t-statistic, sending me an email, and letting me verify your information before you go any farther to reject or not reject your null hypothesis. And again, if you don't get that done before tomorrow, before Tuesday the 21st, that's fine. I'm extending the due date on this lab until the following Tuesday, go ahead and send me that email. I'm, like I said, I'm not in the office Wednesday through Friday this week. That's why I'm giving you a couple of extra days next week. Okay, so now we're going to move on along to questions 5 and 6. Again, the instruction sheet is giving you that U.S. rate. You're not having to look it up from the HCUP website. The U.S. average charge for MS-DRG 470, again, we're only looking at the DRG 470, is $36,450. Formulate a null and alternative hypothesis to test to see if our hospital is statistically different from the U.S. rate. Again, we are calculating a t-test for the population mean, so we're looking at those averages. We're looking at DRG 470, and the easiest way to get the information we want is to do a pivot table. And I am going to show you how to do that. So what we're going to do is we are going back here, because we are looking at number 6 is looking at, number 5 is looking at average charge, and 6 is looking at average length of stay. So what we're going to do is we're going to insert, and we're going to do a pivot table, and we are going to, we want this information in our pivot table, and we are going to do a new worksheet, and we're going to click OK. So now what we have to do is do a little manipulation of the data to get the information that we want. So in our first column, we are going to do our DRGs. So then we want the count of our patients. So we're going to drag patients over here. And remember, it automatically sums that. That's not what we want. We want the count. And what other information? We need length of stay. And we're going to drop that down in there. And again, it sums it. But we know we want the count. Oh, I'm sorry. Not the count. We want the average. Okay, there's our average length of stay for each of our DRGs. And now we want our standard deviation, because remember, that's what we need to plug into that formula. And we're going to drop that in there, and it's summing it. And we're going to change that to standard deviation. See how it gives it that nice little bit of information. And now we're going to add a little bit more. Remember, we're also looking at total charge. We're going to drop total charge in here. And again, it gives us that sum. We're changing that value field to average. And then we're going to drop total charge back in there again. And instead of summing it this time, we want the standard deviation. Okay, so now we're going to clean up this information just a little bit. For these items right here, we want to we want to go about 2 decimal places out. And now we have all the information we need to plug into our formulas for questions 5 and 6. So questions 5, our null hypothesis would be our hospital mean charge is equal to that of that U.S. rate, so name that U.S. rate. And then our alternative hypothesis is they're not. Again, we're setting our alpha level at 0.05. We're doing a 2-sided test. So we are going to have a critical value range of 1.984 plus or minus for our critical value range, and we are plugging in our information for our DRG 470. This is the information we're going to need to plug into both of those formulas. So for number 5, we're looking at the U.S. average charge. So in our formula, we are going to use our average charge, subtract the U.S. average charge, divided by our standard deviation, divided by the square root of our sample size. So everything we need to plug into our formula is right here. The other piece is in your instruction sheet. So you should calculate your t-test for your average charge, and then you should do a t-test for your average length of stay. Again, I'm going to strongly encourage you, once you get those t-test calculated, you send me an email and verify that information with me before you get started on the rest. And then number 7 is just having you make a conclusion based on all the information that was provided to you. You know, this is again another step in this process of the things that you're going to include in your final project. You're going to make those conclusions based on a bunch of information that you brought together. Again, take this assignment and work through it. As you have questions, send me emails and let me know. I may not, depending on what I have going on, I may not reply until Monday, but I will give you until Tuesday night to Tuesday of the following week. So Tuesday, November the 28th, to submit your assignment. If you have additional questions, be sure and let me know.